Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve. We have finally reached the point that many fans of the show, or the comics, or both have been waiting for. Herogasm is here. Today's video is a spoiler-free review of episode 6 of season 3 of The Boys. The title of this episode is Herogasm, and since the official social media accounts of The Boys has been posting that the episode is about Herogasm, I cannot get in trouble for saying that it is in fact part of this episode. There are a lot of really fun things about The Boys as a show finally doing their own take on Herogasm. For one, it's a very well-known thing from the source material, and those who are familiar with the source material have often wondered or inquired as to whether or not the show would ever attempt to do their own take on it. There's a lot of hype, anticipation, and build-up. It's a very salacious concept. I will spare you the details not only for the sake of spoilers, since some of you who are watching this review might not know what comes from Herogasm in the storytelling sense, and if you want the specifics, you are more than free to just look up the source material for yourself, instead of me, a random reviewer, springing that information on you. Another reason why Herogasm is a fun thing to have in this episode is that it's a great opportunity for comedy. I'm not going to elaborate on what's funny about Herogasm, but it's definitely going to make a splash. The Boys as a show has had many memorable OMG moments up until this point, and Herogasm will definitely be contributing at least one or two more to add to that list. But to be quite honest, I think one of the most surprising things about Herogasm is actually how many things happen in this episode that are memorable, that are not happening as part of the Herogasm scene or sequences, whatever you would like to call them. Whether it's things happening with characters that at no point appear at Herogasm, or things that happen after Herogasm, this is still like any other episode of The Boys where there is a whole lot happening. When you try to list all of the big memorable things happening in this episode, it's as impressive as always how long that list is. To try to give some opinions about this episode without giving away spoilers, I'm going to first share a list of 4 characters who stood out to me as my personal favorites for this week. And I mean that in the most vague way possible. When I say they are my favorites this week, it could mean any number of things. It doesn't necessarily mean I am rooting for them in every way possible. It doesn't mean that I am saying that they are a good guy in an overly binary lens of who on this show is a good guy and who is a bad guy. It could simply mean that they were entertaining me, or some other reason that makes me really enjoy watching what it was that they were serving this week. I'm going to share these names in alphabetical order because if I try to do a ranking, I feel like I would run the risk of spoiling. So, in alphabetical order, my 4 favorites from episode 6 are Annie. That might not be surprising considering how this season has been going for her. The second person on the list is A-Train, and you might be surprised by that, but I will not elaborate. The third name on the list is Kimiko, and absolutely none of you are surprised because you know she's my favorite, and if this was a ranking, she would be number 1 every single week, and I will not apologize for that. And finally, the last name on the list, Soldier Boy. Definitely not going to elaborate on that, just stay tuned to see what goes on with him this week. I'm going to make a note to myself to make sure that I give a quick rundown of why I singled these 4 people out to put into my spoiler review for this episode, so all of you won't be left wondering what it was that I was tiptoeing around in this review, what was running through my mind when I decided to uplift these characters for whatever it was that they brought to this episode. Hopefully, it will be self-explanatory once you watch the episode, but we will nonetheless revisit this conversation at the end of this week. The Boys as a show is no stranger to parody and satire. They will take the trending topics of show business, socio-political ongoings, and more, and they will put their own spin on presenting and addressing those things. For example, something we have already seen satirized in season 3 is the infamous Pepsi commercial. They recreated it with A-Train as the celebrity and some Vought beverage instead of Pepsi. I highly doubt that Pepsi would agree to have their product licensed for that purpose. For episode 6, Herogasm, we get yet another parody or satire of something, and let me just say, I had a visceral reaction to it. I've warned you more than once that there is no way for me to talk about The Boys as a show without discussing political topics. They are simply too deeply ingrained into the show's material to avoid. Just prepare yourself now. I have a tangent or a rant. We'll see how calm I will keep myself when recording my thoughts on it. But in general, I feel fractured watching The Boys Season 3 at times. If you've been watching my reviews of Season 3, you know that I've had a lot of problems with the Soldier Boy backstory and how misinformed and lazy that particular storytelling idea is. It gets frustrating watching a show like The Boys oscillate between being a really intelligent show and how it addresses and calls out many things that should in fact be called out, versus those moments where it gets things very wrong. And like I said, we can revisit this conversation later if you care to hear me make a point about the execution of something satirical in this episode. Speaking of political things though, I'm going to bring something up again that I'm pretty sure I've mentioned already in some of my other Season 3 reviews. No, yeah, I definitely have, because I remember dragging Reagan. Then again, when do I not do that? Is it a day ending in the letter Y? If so, I'm dragging Reagan. So I'm going to offer some recommended reading or some recommended Googling, whatever you want to categorize it as, of something in history that I would recommend you read up on ahead of this week's episode, because I personally think that it's useful to have a greater knowledge of the history of what exactly is being referenced in a certain part of the Herogasm episode. So I would suggest that you read up on Operation Cyclone. That was a CIA op in which they funded, armed, and trained the Afghan Mujahideen, because whenever a socialist country is out in the world doing their thing, the CIA always wages war against them. The Mujahideen were extremists, jihadists, whatever you would like to call them. And what an interesting coincidence that you fast forward 20 years from that op, and the US was more than ready to demonize the Middle East as a region and deem it necessary to go after these extremists who are running around with a bunch of weapons and training. Interesting. Where did they get the weapons from? Where did they get the training from? The other thing I would recommend you look up is the controversy surrounding the film Rambo 3. The film in general, but also the film's credits. I won't spoil it for you, but just look it up. Like I said, all of this is relevant recommended reading, so you can be more informed about the material and commentary of this episode. I will, of course, talk more about it with more specifics in my spoiler review, but I'm just giving you a nudge, so if you would like to look it up now, you have the option to do so. Now I'm almost finished sharing what little I feel like sharing before this episode airs, so I would like to take a moment to address anyone who has been popping in to watch my reviews and chime in on the larger conversation about Jensen Ackles' Soldier Boy and the frustration over how long it's taken to get him in the mix. But I do want to offer a bit of extra reassurance. He is on the show now. You want him to monologue, he's going to give you a monologue. You want him to do action, he's going to give you action. You want him to wear the super suit, he will be wearing the super suit. You want him to be an out-of-touch old man boomer in the body of a conventionally attractive 40-something-year-old, he's going to do exactly what I just said. Do I still think that overall Jensen Ackles has been underused this season? Yes, I've said it once and I will probably continue to say it. There are too many main characters in the ensemble at this point to be able to really do them justice with only 8 episodes to do so. But we are now in the second half of the season, so if you have come here to watch Jensen do stuff, this is when he does stuff. The final thing I want to say about this episode, which is more or less a reiteration of what I've already said, is that I love the fact that more or less all of my favorite things about this episode, Herogasm, have little to nothing to do with the Herogasm concept. And I don't want anyone misinterpreting my words to think that I'm disparaging the execution of Herogasm on the show. I just think that Herogasm as an idea in the larger storytelling of the show feels like something that really relies on shock. We had a very shocking opening bit for season 3 involving sneezing, and I know that things like this are part of the brand of The Boys, but I think at this point we're in season 3, we've developed a lot of emotional investment in many of these characters, whether it's because we want them to succeed or because we want them to fail. So now is when I feel strongly that the greatest payoff I can get as a viewer is when there are developments in the stories and character arcs of the people we've been following for all this time. If we don't like where they're going or what they're doing, we want them to get some sort of karmic retribution. If we do like them and what they're doing, then we want to see them succeed, overcome, and thrive. And that's really where I feel episode 6 is so successful. There's a lot of buildup for a lot of these characters, and the developments we get for many of those stories is what ultimately proved to be so satisfying for me as a viewer of this episode. And that's also why I was frustrated by the delay in effectively introducing and integrating Jensen Ackles' Soldier Boy into the mix. When they brought Stormfront into the fold in season 2, you need to remember that the 3-episode premiere of season 2 culminated in her attack on that building and the rooftop scene with that horrific sequence with her and Kimiko's brother Kenji. It was really hard to watch, but it was excellent storytelling. And then you had another month, longer than a month actually, 5 weeks, to see her mayhem and then pray for her downfall. But anyway, let me not needlessly rub salt in the wounds of Jensen Ackles' stands. I think I've made my point very clear by now. So if you liked this review, don't forget to like this review, subscribe for even more videos, not only about The Boys, but plenty of other films and television series. See you in a few days when I will be back on my channel with my spoiler review of episode 6. Bye!